We are the seminar of the International Inequalities Institute. I have to say my name is Facundo Alvaredo. I am a professorial research fellow at the Institute. Today we are receiving Elena and Bárcena Martín, who is a professor at the University of Malaga. She is also treasurer of ECINEC, the Society for the Study of Economic Inequality, an associate editor for the Journal of Economic Inequality and the Review of Public Economics, and book editor of the Journal of Economic Inequality. And the title of the presentation today is Assessment of Individual Income Growth with Relative Concern. And I have just one additional announcement for the online audience. Please keep yourself muted. And then you will have the opportunity to, I look at them as if they were there. You will have the opportunity to ask the questions later. Well, welcome, Elena. Go ahead. You have something like 40 minutes.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present a work in progress today. This is the proposal of an assessment of individual income growth with relative concerns. Let's try.
You need to click on the screen.
No, it doesn't work. Okay, don't worry, don't worry. This is a, no, maybe it's frozen there. No. Okay, this is a work in process with my colleague Francisca Garcia Bravo from the University of Malaga and Philippe Banker. Well, in first, Jenkins and Banker in 2016 proposed to that the social evaluation of income growth are based on utilitarian social welfare functions that depends or are the aggregation of utility functions that depend on the income of the individual and the change in the income of the individual. So income in the present and the past income of the individual. So they propose that level and also the change in income matters for welfare. What are we proposing in this paper? Well, we try to introduce relative concerns. So for welfare, it's not only important your income and how your income is changing, but also how the other's income changes. And to motivate this introduction of relative concerns, we consider that as the society is progressing, once you have a certain level of life, you are worried about your status. So let's try to introduce these other reference points that are not only internal points, but also external points. So in the assessment of this income growth, we are going to account for own income at 2 periods of time, 0 and 1, we will call it, and then income of others at time 0 and time 1. So what we are introducing are more arguments here on the utility functions. So we have present income, the change in income of other in present, and how incomes of other are changing. Those reference group, we will talk later, who are those who you are comparing with. So we could think about how this measure should be, or how this utility function should be. We think that it should increase utility, should increase when own income is increasing, but when others' income is increasing, maybe it should reduce your utility. But there are also other types of comparisons that maybe you are not changing your income, but the others are changing and are overpassing you, so it will make your utility to reduce. or you can increase your income, but if others increase even more, maybe your utility is reduced. So we try to keep some kind, all these things in mind to present our motivation. But first, let's see what we have in the literature. We have that when we are talking about relative income, we have this notion of relative deprivation in the literature. And let's assume that we have at least two individuals. So we have a vector of income. So it's the income distribution of the n individuals at a certain point in time. And this is the mean income. So we can say that in terms of Jetsaki and Hay and Lambert, the deprivation felt by an individual is the sum or the average of all the income gaps when this individual is comparing with all those who are richer than him or her. So the reference group in this case is all those richer than you. And we will keep this reference group as our reference group. Later in the literature, we find that there is a relative formulation of this deprivation, relative deprivation measure that is only this one proposed by Jitsaki and Fay and Lambert, but divided by mu. So the relative deprivation is always between 0 and 1, so it's easy to compare the individual's deprivation. This same function has been used as a membership function to evaluate the degree an individual is left behind with a fuzzy set approach. This the degree an individual is left behind is exactly the relative deprivation, and it is a convenient way of assessing the level an individual is left behind, because we say that an individual is more left behind, the higher is the proportion of individuals with income greater than his own income, and an individual is more left behind also, the more those who have richer have. So the greater the gap between the income share of all those richer than you compared with your own gap, the more left behind you are. So we propose to use this kind of motivation, of relative deprivation motivation, to evaluate income growth. There are other proposals in the literature where they have used the term of relative deprivation and have tried to introduce this time perspective in the formulation. We have this proposal of Bosser and Ambrosio, where they say that relative deprivation today depends on the comparison with those who are richer today, but they also analyze those that are passing due. So they take into account something that is cross-sectional, how you compare with those who are richer than you, and then you take something into account, something that is more longitudinal, that is you compare with all those who pass due. Then later, these two authors also propose to take into account relative deprivation today and give more weight to those who are passing due, because maybe what worries you more is being left behind. So you are more left behind, the more people is overpassing you. Later, or also in the literature, we have Lydia Ciarani and Chiara Gigliarano that propose to analyze relative deprivation today. Again, they compare income of individuals with those richer than them, but they introduce time, this time when they compare the individuals with their own past. So they don't look at the past of the others, but to their own past. What we propose, in fact, is to use this setting and analyze the change in relative deprivation that depends on the comparison with Richard today, but in fact, it depends with comparison with own income in previous time as Gigliarano and Seriani, and it also depends on the comparison with Richard at any time. As we can see, here we have introduced being passed by other individuals also. So here in this pink term, we have all this idea of Gosser and Ambrosia. Well, how are we trying to analyze or assess individual income growth with these relative concerns? Let's think in a fixed population, again with n individuals. This time we have income distribution at time t. T will be 0, the base period, and 1, that is the second period. We have the mean in each period, and we have this notion of being left behind, or the degree an individual is left behind. That could be also the relative deprivation of an individual. And what we try to analyze is the change in the degree an individual is left behind. So we analyze this change that would be the difference between these two terms. And as we saw before, is the proportion of individuals that are richer than you at time 1, the income gap, or the income share gap with respect to those richer than you at time 1, and the same at time 0. We have to account that here in this formulation, we have two reference groups, those who are richer than you at time 0, and those richer than you at time 1. And they don't need to be the same. There are people that can join your reference group, and there is people that can leave your reference group. So we have two different reference groups, those richer than you at time 0, and those richer than you at time 1. Well, now what we are going to do is to work a little bit this expression. What we try to do is, as Jenkins and Van Kerm do in their paper in 2016, try to decompose this change in relative deprivation, or in the degree an individual is left behind, in two terms that has to do with re-ranking and progressivity, but from the individual point of view. So first, we have to introduce this artificial measure of being left behind, that is just the same formula we saw before applied to incomes at time 1, but when individuals are ranking regarding their position at time 0. So let's see here. If those are incomes at time 0, then we have here incomes at time 1 that are arranged in ascending order. There are individuals that have moved their position. What we are going to do is we are going to keep positions at time 0, but with the incomes at time 1. So here we are going to compute the formula of relative deprivation of the formula of being left behind. Well, this way we will have an assessment of the re-ranking and progressivity in from the individual point of view. Here we have an expression that is really big, but we will analyze by part. We will start with the second part, progressivity, that in general terms is an assessment of if your growth is greater than the growth of those richer than you. So let's see that here we have the change in the degree an individual is left behind, depends on the ranking, and progressivity with a negative before the progressivity. So when we work, we have said that it has two terms. We call it PI and PG. This is the individual progressivity of the part of progressivity that corresponding to the individual, and this is the part of the progressivity that correspond to the group. In fact, what we have here is relative own income growth, how much you are growing. Here you have how much the reference group at time 0 has growth on average. Okay, so we have these two parts. And what we can say is, okay, you are going to be more left behind the less you grow and the more the others grow, or other way around. You are less left behind if you grow more than the others grow. Then we have the re-ranking, or the re-ranking term, that here we have to account for reference group, but now we have two different reference group of a mix of reference group. We have those who are always richer than you at time 0 and also at time 1. We have those who were poorer than you, but now are richer than you. So those who have overpassed you. And then you have those who you are overpassing. So they were richer than you, but at the second time, you are richer than them. So we have these three groups. We don't consider those who are always poorer than you, because you are always looking at those better positioned than you. So we have these three groups. If we work a little, this expression, what we end up having is this formula that where we have, this is the proportion of individuals that overpass you. Then you have the proportion of individuals that you overpass them. So the re-ranking terms has into account this reshuffling of individuals with respect to your position. Obviously, these are weighted by the difference between the mean of those who are overpassing you or those who you are overpassing. And in fact, this term is always positive, because if you are overpassing those individuals, this term will be negative, and this negative, it will cancel out. So the interpretation of the re-ranking term, it will be you are more left behind, the more reshuffling is around you. And if we sum up all these measures for all the individuals in the society, what we have is the expression that also takes Jenkins and Banker in 2006. And we would end up having a term that is the re-ranking in the overall population and the progressivity in the overall population. And then the overall change in the degree individuals are left behind is no more than the difference between the Gini index at time 1 and at time 0. So what kind of properties would this measure satisfy? Well, we have monotonicity, so any marginal increase in income of individual life has a marginal effect on this measure. We have also that is replication invariant, that is convenient when we are comparing population with different size. We have normalization. This measure is between -1 and 1, so we are ready to compare, to make a lot of comparisons, because we have the measure that is normalized. Then we have a strongly scaled invariance. It means that any change, proportional change at time 0, and any change at proportional change at time 1, these changes that not need to be the same at 2 points in time would make no change in our measure. Then we have that there is a preference for progressive income growth, because it is weighting more any growth of those lower position in the income distribution. And finally, the degree an individual is left behind decreases with own income growth and increases when the others grow. Well, to try to explore this property and show how can we, or what this measure can add to what we know, we have done an empirical application. We study annual income changes in Spain from 2009 to 2020. We have used the European Spanish Living Conditions Survey, that is the Spanish version of the EU SILC, for the longitudinal files from 2011 to 2021. Income, as is usual, we have used this household disposable income that is adjusted with the modified OECD equivalent scale. Then we have income growth. We have considered changes from one year to the next, so year-to-year changes. We report estimates based on data trimmed, so we have rid of the 1% with greater incomes and 1% poor individuals, but the same conclusions are obtained when there is no trimming at all. Data set is cleaned by dropping zero and negative incomes, and calculations use sample longitudinal weights. And as I said, one of the main advantage of our measure is that we have individual information. And obviously, when we have a huge survey, it is impossible to show you every individual. What we have done is to group the information by income classes. So we will work with low, middle, upper middle, and upper class. I will show you when it comes, but first, what we have is what we could get with what we have in the literature. We have all this year, all these changes, and we observe this change in the degree individuals are left behind. That, as I said before, is just the change in the Gini index. And we have this decomposition proposed by Jenkins and Banker of re-ranking and progressivity. What we see is that in 2012 to 2013, and in the first year of the pandemic, what we had was an increase in inequality, or increase in the average level, and an individual is left behind. And this is because re-ranking is much higher than progressivity. Then we have some years where we have a reduction in inequality, and this is not because the re-ranking has reduced, but because more or less is the same. It is because there is more progressivity. But this is in general terms, and we would like to have more information. It has been that way for everyone. That means progressivity has increased for all individuals, or as it is an average, some cancel with another. So here is just the evolution of the degree an individual is left behind. So the change in the inequality, we see that in the pandemic and in 2012, there is an increase in inequality. This is due to the ranking being greater than progressivity, and the other way around for the other years. Well, if we work with this other decomposition by income classes, here we would have those individuals with income smaller than the 75% of the median income, Then lower middle are those individuals with incomes between 75 and 125. Then we will see later the upper middle is for those who have incomes between 125 and 200% of the median income, twice the median income, and the upper class, those with incomes greater than twice the median income.
So classes are defined in the base year.
Sorry? The base year, yes. They are classified by incomes in the base year, yes. So what we have, we can see here that even though we had some years that the degree individuals are left behind increase and another decrease, in fact, the lower class always reduce their average level, they are left behind. Obviously with some changes, and obviously in the year of the pandemic, they reduce less the degree they are left behind, but this is not the case for the lower middle class. The lower middle class increase a little the level they are left behind. Even though we can see a change in the trend because there was a reduction in the trend, the individuals were increasing the degree they were left behind, that immediately changed with the pandemic. For the upper and the upper middle and the upper class, we have that individuals increase the level they are left behind more or less in similar terms. If we compare the classes and we see progressivity by income classes, we see that obviously those individuals in the lower class have much more progressivity. That means that if they grow more than all those richer than them, while if they reduce income, they reduce income less than those richer than them. This is also the case for the other classes, but the other classes show much less progressivity. So all of them experience progressivity, but at different levels. Then with re-ranking, what we get is something that is usual in the literature when we are analyzing income changes, that is when we have transition matrices, those on the bottom and those on the top of the distribution, they have less mobility. So they have less re-ranking, and here we can see that lower and upper income individuals show less re-ranking, while middle income individuals have more inequality. But we can have some more information and we can see where this progressivity stems from. And we have here for the lower class, if we check here, we have in blue line the own growth. And we see that lower class individuals, all of them experience growth, while those who they are comparing with, that is those in the yellow line, they are having a reduction in their incomes. So the difference, as you remember, it was your own growth minus the growth of the others. As a result, we have a big progressivity, that is the orange line. What happened for the lower middle class? Here they also experience growth, but this growth is much smaller than for the others. And then here we have also a reduction. Look that the axes are different to show you properly in the same picture. Here we have the reduction of those who they comparing with. So they also have a progressivity, but of a less dimension, is smaller. So progressivity in lower and lower middle class come basically for increases in their relative income, but losses in the relative income of richer individuals. But this is not the case for the upper and the upper middle and the upper class. In the upper middle class, they are reducing incomes. And also the others who they are comparing with. But the others are reducing more than the individuals in the upper middle class, and this is why they have progressivity. They don't show regressivity. And finally, for the upper class, we have also that they are reducing incomes, but the others, those in the upper class, more richer than them, they are reducing even more. And this is why they have also progressivity. So progressivity in the upper middle and upper class come from losses, not increases as before, losses in the relative income, but this time greater losses are for those richer than them. So concluding, what we have is an evaluation of income change from an individual perspective. That is just completing or adding something more what we have. It's nothing that we want to substitute in information. It's something that can provide you more insights, especially for designing policy, so that you can analyze. We have down here by income class, but we could have down by sex, by age, by type of family. And so you can see how they change depending on the socio-demographic characteristics. You not only see how relative deprivation or the degree they are left behind changes, but also how it is decomposed into progressivity and re-ranking. And then we have these differences between own income growth and income growth of others, so those two terms of progressivity. In the illustration, main conclusions is that the changes, income changes in Spain has been always progressive by income classes. In times of crisis, this progressiveness has not counterbalanced the re-ranking, so the inequality has increased, but income change evaluation has not been the same for all income classes. And here we have progressivity in the lower and lower middle class come from increases in their relative income and losses on those who are their reference group, while in the upper and upper class, they have losses that are smaller than losses for their reference group. Then from re-ranking, we have the usual conclusion that is re-ranking is higher in the middle classes. And finally, the degree the individuals are left behind, lower class reduce the level they are left behind because of high progressivity compared to lower ranking, while lower middle class increase the degree they are left behind because of low progressivity compared with high re-ranking, while upper, middle, and upper class increase the level of being left behind because of low progressivity, and mixed ranking because the upper class have more ranking than the upper middle class. So this is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena. So lots of hands raised already, but let me say something to the people online. Again, I am looking at you. I don't know if you are there. You can just, or I don't know, there's another there. So either you can send your questions through the chat so that Peter can read them perhaps, or you can raise your hand in Zoom as usual. Go ahead. So.
Even if you actually answered this, but I understood that you had these reference groups that were partly relative to where you are now, the people in the income distribution right now. And this was then combined also with those who may be overtaking it. Did you just, in effect, take one system of weighting those two, or did you look at alternative ways of making up the reference group?
Yes, obviously you can, once you compare with those who are your reference group, you can add different weights. If you add different weight, then you lose the property of, in the overall distribution, being equal to what we have in the literature, that is the difference in the Gini index. But obviously we can add different weights, but we lose this.
Yeah, I mean, what I had in mind was that this is another area in which you could examine the empirical validity of your approach by social survey studies, which give you some insight onto what weight people put on where they are now or where they aspire to be, you know, looking at, well, I could be there, yes. In terms of income expectations, which may be formed.
In fact, I will show you something. I have not here. In fact, we were trying to put the social welfare, sorry, not social welfare, the subjective welfare of an individual depends on all these terms, and we can compute more or less how much weight we can give to the comparison to different individuals. And recently, Sterling has a paper where he says that in times of crisis, individuals look more to own income, while when you are in a good economic cycle, what you look is at others. So we could even weight different groups differently and also differently depending on the economic cycle. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. I have two questions mainly, I think, for me to understand how the normative intuitions of this are formalized, or to understand them more clearly anyways. And sorry, I'm not very familiar with this literature, so this might be very obvious to people who know this, but I don't understand why this focus on the rankings and the decomposition in ranks. It seems like you dilute the attention to something that's very clear, like an absolute or relative inequality or change by ordinal ranks. And I don't really get that point, especially if you then think about policy concerns, or also think about subjective issues where I don't think the precise rank is necessarily something that an individual is aware of. And then secondly, the reference population. I understand how you would see that from an individual subjective, where you see yourself perspective, you want to position the reference group as whoever at any point is above that individual. But especially from a policy point of view or ethical point of view, I don't understand why that would be something you would want to pay attention to. If I'm Bill Gates, of course, I look at Elon Musk and all these other people, but why dilute the nice distribution you anyways have by those subjectivist elements that for policy purposes, especially in the upper tail of the distribution, I think might produce results that will actually lead to much more conservative estimates than you would actually want to have and want to suggest from a societal perspective. Yeah.
Okay, I agree with you that sometimes you don't compare with all of those who are above you. So you have different reference group. I'm moving back to show you something, why we use this re-ranking, that I think is what you have asked me. A little bit. Okay, I agree with you that sometimes we don't compare with all of those who are above you. In fact, in the illustration, I said, we are getting rid of those who are in the 1% up of the distribution, because they could introduce some distortion in our estimates. It is not the case in that case, but it could be, because if we have Elon Musk in Spain, probably we had some problems with that. So if he moves from one year to the next, so it would change. But we could restrict the reference group and to code people up to a certain level of income if we don't want those rich, very, very rich. And why we introduce this re-ranking, or this term re-ranking, what we do in fact is we work with those individuals that have this decomposition. We introduce this term because we are comparing incomes up time 1, but they are ordered differently here. And here we have the same order and they are having different incomes. This is what we do. And we think that welfare or your well-being depends, in fact, on ranking. At least at part, yes. We should discuss about that. But your ranking is important, especially when you are in more developed economies. Once you are attain a certain level of consumption, you have your food, your house and everything. Maybe what you want to have is what the others have. And in that sense, this ranking would capture this type of effect on well-being. Obviously, we should, or we can compare what is your well-being punctuation depending on your ranking and how your ranking changes and how is your income and how your income changes. And then we can conclude that maybe the ranking is not so important, but in the literature it says that it has a role.
Yeah.
We take different questions and then we go back to one online question.
Okay.
Thanks, Elena. Really interesting talk. You've talked about deprivation, so everything is, in a sense, upward looking.
Yeah.
Dissatisfaction, relatively speaking. But I wondered why you can't turn everything around the other way.
Smugness.
Exactly. So Powell and Flasher, have for ordinal data have upward looking and downward looking status. So you could, in your cross-sectional point of view, have relative achievement or relative satisfaction. In the dynamic bit, you could have not just have left behind, but you could have got ahead.
Yeah.
So anyway, I put that to you because to the extent to which they provide similar or different things. Second, let me communicate to you 2 referee comments that Philippe and I got that you'll probably get again. One is you've given priority, this being devil's advocate, you've given priority to the base year in defining everything. But you started with utilitarian welfare function defined over incomes at time 0 and time 1, or the second year. What's so special about the base year?
Yeah.
Second referee comment always comes up in this context. Regression to the mean. What about it? Thirdly, just your final remark about decompositions. I like them by in class. But they work, I think, because you've got a Gini and you've got non-overlapping subgroups in the base year. But then you said, oh, we can also do it by sex and family and things like that. I'm not sure you can, because I think the distributions in the base year will be overlapping. So that'll probably destroy everything.
Okay. Let's see if I remember everything. If not, you tell me. Obviously, yes, we have started with the deprivation, but we could have started with the same formulation for satisfaction. We start with this deprivation because as far as we have seen in the literature, when you are analyzing your well-being, it matters more all those who you are looking for upper in the distribution than lower in the distribution. And because of this idea of the sustainable development goals, that is leaving no one behind. So, okay, let's see upward in the distribution, but obviously we could have the other way around. It is true that we take the reference as reference the base year, the first year. We could have taken the other way around, maybe. We can check if things change a lot. I'm afraid it changes. But it makes sense, I think, to start from the past and go forward, but it's okay. You said the last one, well, regression to the
decomposition.
Okay, decomposition. It works even if you have overlapping groups, because here we are not working with a mean of each group. If not, we are looking, when we look for, let's say, if we are in the lower class and we look to his reference group, we are looking to all those upper in the distribution. If we look at women, what we are going to do is, I will look to all women, but women will compare with all those richer than her, but it can be men or women. So the decomposition is, you can do the decomposition. It has not to do with the usual decomposition of the Gini index in between and within, but it's a kind of Dagun change of decomposition. So it should work. I have not here, we have done for the families with and without children, and it works.
So now, Chico, are you hearing us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Elena. Thanks for the talk. Sorry that I'm not there in person. And sorry also, I'm very jet lagged, so this question may be more stupid than my usual questions. But it's a three-part question. So first, just to check my basic understanding, you've basically shown us that a measure of change in relative deprivation effectively collapses to a measure of mobility, right? So the first part of the question is to ask whether that is true or not. I mean, it sounds like the measure in the end that you have is a measure of mobility, but maybe it's not. And so just asking about that formally, that's part one. Part two is, if it is a measure of mobility, then, in some sense, I'm just wanting to check the intuition, because obviously a change in poverty or a change in inequality, changes in characteristics of a distribution, like inequality and poverty, are typically not a measure of mobility. But perhaps the reason changes in relative deprivation can collapse to a measure of mobility is because relative deprivation depends on where you are. So it keeps, it's not anonymous in some sense. It keeps your position in both places matter. And because it's not anonymous, then a change in something that's not anonymous ends up being, and it's the full distribution, ends up being a measure of mobility. So I also wanted to check whether that was true. And then the third and final part is, in the literature on mobility, people sometimes talk about exchange and structural mobility. And often in absolute mobility terms, right, the structural has to do with change, growth, and exchange has to do with re-ranking. Here it's all relative, but maybe it's similar in the sense that the re-ranking is kind of, your re-ranking component is kind of an exchange part, whereas the structural part is the reduction in inequality, which is progressivity. So just also to comment on whether that was a correct intuition or not. Thanks.
Thank you, Chico. Let's move to here. You say that this change in the relative deprivation, if it is a measure of mobility, I would say no. I would say one of its component is obviously this re-ranking, and it could be volatility, not mobility, because it is just changing and we don't account for changing upward or downward, but it has this other component. So it is not only a measure of mobility, but there is a component of mobility. Obviously, as you said, here what we add is that individual identification. So we don't have a change in inequality as such, but we have a change in global inequality from the individual perspective. So even in the individual perspective, you have a component that is ranking and another that is progressivity. I would say that it's only a part, it's not just a measure of mobility. And finally, you say that the composition in absolute term is like the exchange and a structural mobility. And it's true, the idea is the same. We work everything in relative terms. Here we have everything in relative terms, but we could have work in absolute terms. The problem if we work in absolute terms is that we have not a normalized measure, so comparisons are not so easy to compute. And we thought it makes more sense to do it in relative terms, and more if what we are talking about is being or leaving no one behind and this relative situation. I'm not sure if I answer all your concerns. I hope so. But...
Yes, thank you, Elena. Perfect. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Another question?
Hi. Well, thanks so much, Elena. It was a great talk. I had a couple of thoughts which connect to both Stephen's comments and also to what Chico just mentioned about. First of all, one of the things you mentioned were about the arbitrariness of the choice of the starting year. As you mentioned, it's going to vary as you change the starting year. One of the things you might find is if you take a probabilistic approach, you might act, and I guess that's another new paper altogether. That might, so it's basically an extension of what you're doing right now, is that you might be able to get rid of the arbitrariness of the starting year. That also connects with what Chico was mentioning, that from a certain point of view, you could view your work as being one of the mobility measures. So the moment you take a probabilistic approach, you are approaching that field as well. So this is just a thought for you, for your second paper, an extension on this. And the other thing was also about Stephen's point about whether you would like to consider your measure as one of smugness as opposed to one of relative deprivation. Something also which Chico also brought upon in terms of it being one of relative deprivation. I personally think your work would really connect well with the growth and development literature, where there's still a huge need for different kinds of measures by which we can measure catch up. So whilst there is of course room for this being a measure of reversing it and considering it to be a measure of smugness, this would be a fabulous continuation of the studies that have done in growth and development. So I like the relative deprivation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Yes.
So Chico has jet lag. My head hurts because this is my first academic seminar in about 20 years. I'm a visiting fellow who's just started. Just a question about your assumptions on household size. I didn't quite understand why it matters necessarily the size of a household. So if the household has a baby in this time, will that necessarily affect perceptions of?
I think you talk about the empirical application, right?
Yeah.
When I said that
we
use the modified OECD scale, well, when you have income, imagine that you will have a family of 2 people and total income is 3,000 euros. And we have a family with 2 people, 2 adults, 3 kids, and the amount of money is the same. So what we have is that from the individual's perspective, the income enjoyed by this 2-member family is not the same as in the other. So we had into account not only the household size, but also composition regarding age, because it accounts this modified OECD scale accounts as one, the first adult member. Then the second one accounts as 0.5, and each children as 0.3. So you take into account this size and age composition.
You're right. If you have a kid and your income doesn't change, household income doesn't change, the real income goes down.
Right, but your perception of how you might be placed in society that need not change, right?
It's all in terms, Elena's doing it all in terms of real adjusted income.
Okay. And then the other question was, so how will your methodology, or why and how will your methodology help policy making?
How and why?
Will your methodology help in terms of policy?
No, okay. When you have inequality, because in the end, what we have with the change, overall change in the degree individuals are left behind is this change in the Gini index. And we can say, okay, inequality has reduced from 2021 to 2022, but not everyone in the distribution has experienced this reduction in the same sense. So you can see that maybe not in the overall measure, there is a reduction in inequality, but there are a certain group of people that are not experiencing, or they are not are included in this growth with the other individuals. So you can focus on them and design specific policies to help them to progress at the same path of the others.
More sophisticated diagnostic of what's happening, what is happening.
More individualistic diagnostic of what is happening.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. That was also my second question I asked initially. So instead of the 1%, which you excluded, my question was more about take that point and then apply it to the top 10%, top 20%. Why should policymakers care about people feeling left behind at that top end of the distribution? I get the subjective well-being literature and all that, fine. I don't think it translates into the ranks, so that might be something where I haven't seen any good empirical evidence on that, so that might be something to put in there. But then why should I as a policymaker care about someone in the top 10% feeling left behind?
Okay, don't care, don't pay attention to them. You can just focus on, okay, we are going to look at the bottom half of the distribution. Let's see how they are progressing. Let's see if they are included in the progress. Let's see if women are progressing or not at the same path of the others. So with this, I have done the entire distribution. Obviously, as a policymaker, you have to focus on certain vulnerable groups. Maybe they are the lower half of the distribution, the family with kids or wherever. So you don't need to look at the entire distribution, but here I say, okay, you have the entire distribution and you know how they evolve in overall terms with the Gini index. I decompose and I give you every piece, but maybe you just want to look at one of these pieces.
Where's then the addition from that to like an inequality measure that would, or a relative income measure or something like that, that would place more focus on the bottom distribution, or would look at only the bottom 40% like the World Bank. So what's the...
Sorry again, can you...
Yeah, so where does that add to what I mean, because those approaches already exist, right? So where do I get something new if I apply this, which uses the entire distribution at first in order then again to only focus on parts of it for policy purposes, whereas for that second part, a lot is already out there.
I'm not sure if I understand you properly, okay? But if here you have how the Gini index changes for the overall distribution, and then you go, we have not the numbers, but here we have how specifically the lower class changes. You can see that maybe there were an increase in inequality, but the piece of inequality was reducing every single year, not at the same path, but they were reducing at the same, they were reducing. And you could analyze, for example, what happened in the first year of the pandemic. They were increasing more or less than the other. Since looked at the axes are different, so they increase more than the others. So you can analyze. I'm not sure I understood properly.
Yeah, I might rephrase it and try again later.
Okay.
We have the final intervention by Chico online.
Sorry, yeah, no, it's just coming back to Stephen's point about regression to the mean, and if if your referee does say that, I think the answer might be that even if this isn't a measure of mobility, which I have to think more about, you told me it's not, but it does have a component of mobility in it for sure, and in mobility, regression to the mean is not something that you worry about. It is mobility, right? Regression to the mean is usually a critique to changes in measure of inequality when you interpret as a change of inequality the fact that people are converging, and that's of course wrong. But changes in ranks and people moving up and down, churning is a measure of mobility, of some kinds of mobility, not directional, but non-directional kinds of mobility. It's quite right. It's a different issue that there may be measurement error augmenting that, but that's a separate issue from the conceptual issue of regression to the mean. So to the extent that changes in relative deprivation actually inherently involve mobility, regression to the mean is quite rightly part of it. I don't know if that makes sense. But.
Hey, Chico, I will call you if I have this comment from the referee.
Well,
we have measurement error.
Sorry?
Part of the answer is, as Chico says, it's to do with whether or not we have measurement error.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of everybody, I thank you, Elena, for the presentation.